Welcome back to Fighting Insights. Lim, we had Bite of the Night yesterday. We need to kick off with it. We've got a pretty full docket. We've got Bite of the Night, Conor having spasms. Yep. We've got Francis Ngannou, and then your time in Bellator this weekend. But let's kick off with the big bite. I mean, we've got an up-and-coming hungry fighter. He's in the octagon, and he's...
Pun intended, yeah.
Pun fully intended, and he's taking bites out of people. What's happening?
Yeah, welcome to the Biting Insights podcast, yeah?
That's it.
What is happening? I have no idea. I have no idea what is going on, man, you know? And if you see that position as well, it wasn't like something was being forced into his mouth. Like, he had decent control position. He had his head in the guy's tricep. Just thought he'd take a nibble. What's your thoughts?
Well, obviously he's hungry, but... Here's my take on it, right? Like, there's a couple of facts. Number one, he is 20. Okay, I'm going to make the argument that I don't think he should be released from the UFC because he is 20 years old. Yep. His brain is not fully developed yet. By the way, I disagree with what he did 100%.
Good to go fist fight another human being.
Yeah, exactly. But like, if you look, someone else said his topology report is like his ear bleeding, or like if you check it out, like he's basically bleeding, and it's like, is he embodying that tap out 2015 like ideological just bleed bro type of approach? He was losing the fight. It ended quite like, obviously they were against the cage, and he just a little nibble, a little bit of a bite, you know, being a little peckish, just jumps in there a little bit. I don't know, it feels, we can't have it as a standard, as a precedent.
Absolutely not.
But at the same time, like, it's his full career, and I just wonder if he needs to be suspended, take 6 months off, and then come back.
I think you know, you can make the analogy of Mike Tyson in his frustrations biting Evander Holyfield. So what I would say is that I'm not against redemption for people in these scenarios. Also, I mean, I really doubt that there's anything that we haven't seen here, but we don't always know the full picture. I will share a little story. When I competed on Polaris against Chris Fishgold, that was a really intense match. It was short notice, 15 minutes. And we swept each other back and forth. And at one point, Chris grabbed my face. And as he grabbed my face, he put, I think it was his thumb, or he put something into
Fish hooked you, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And he complained to the ref that I'd bitten him. And I said to him, like, I didn't, and I can prove this, because if I'd bitten you, there'd be a bite mark, because I'm not wearing a gum shield. So if I bit you at all, which I didn't, you know what I mean, then you will see a bite mark on this fighter. Do you know what I mean? And that bite mark that we see is really conspicuous, and it's through a gum shield as well. So I feel a little bit of vindication.
True, actually, yeah.
But I also feel like, you know, that we have a full set of information. I would argue that I think that it's his time to get cut, and I know that he has been cut. You know, that's come out now recently. And the reason that I would argue that is because, number one, fighter safety is most paramount. And like, that guy is basically saying that he's not, or he's either not mentally aware enough, or he is mentally aware enough and has made a choice to disregard the rules. And we've seen Paul Daly get cut for something like that. You know, and I think, as I said, I'm not entirely against redemption, but as an organization, you cannot be seen to have any... How do you give that guy another fight? You know, you're essentially saying, I'm going to reward you for a loss and for bad behavior. You can't... My thing is, in the short term especially, like, the way you do one thing is the way that you do all things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you make some good points there. I suppose if you're a new fighter, you want to go into the octagon knowing that your opponent's going to respect an agreed upon set of rules. Usama Polaris, I think, is a good example of that. Like, you get to the point where, like, even if you think you're going to win, you just kind of don't want to fight that guy, because if he gets on, like, you're talking a career-defining injury. That said, this guy has been punched in the head for a living, and he's 20 years old.
So
and I feel that there needs to be repercussions for this, there needs to be sanctions for this, and he needs to feel a little bit of a world of pain. I also agree with you when you say there needs to be some kind of pathway back for this guy. Like, he's gone from having his entire ambitions, his entire world is finally made it to UFC. He did something stupid. We don't know why he's done something stupid. I guess my point would be, maybe he needs a multi-year suspension, kick from the organization, but with an opportunity to work his way back with the right appropriate track records. But I think there needs to be a 2-strike and you're out. I mean, you are literally banned forever. I mean, like, this is a really terrible analogy, but if you drive a car and you actually kill someone, like vehicular manslaughter, for example, just for complete mistake or your negligence, you get 10-year ban.
Okay.
And the UFC is issuing out lifetime bans. Like, I guess
it's
maybe
a difference between the private company and public sort of space.
I agree, but I guess 10 years would be an effective lifetime ban for most UFC fighters anyway.
Yeah, I think that's career defining, isn't it? I would love to hear his take, because this guy was undefeated this guy has an 8-0 record, which is now 8-1, and like you do not give up that you do not give up that momentum, that you know, that's something that's incredibly valuable. Undefeated record is insanely valuable in MMA when we know that there's so many ways to lose. So to give up that undefeated record, to basically become a laughing stock of the entire world and this entire scene, you know, like, why? What went through your mind? And I would love to hear his rationale here if he's either A, has a reason for it, I don't know, which I can't possibly imagine what it would be, or B, if he just holds his hands up and was just like, the moment got to me, it was my debut, if it was his debut, it was my debut, and, you know, the pressure was so much, I couldn't believe I was losing the fight, like, I'm really, really sorry, I will take whatever suspension, ban, cut on the chin, you know what I mean, and I will move forward, and I will work super hard to try and work my way back into a place where I get an opportunity like this in the future, you know, maybe, but I for the life of me, I think part of the reason why it's such sensational news is it just makes no sense.
So an argument against the guy is the fact that when he bit him, the guy said, "Hey ref, the guy's just, you got Dracula over here chugging bites out of me." What? And he went to address the ref, and as he went to address the ref, the guy took him down.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like in the heat of the, like, he obviously knew he bit him. Maybe he like psychologically did. But then it's like, if your psychology is to a level where you can't realize that you bit someone and cannot adjust, are you mentally kind of like okay to be fighting
Not qualified,
in the first place?
Yeah. I think time will tell on this one. He has been cut.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
but the UFC is leaning into it.
Oh, absolutely.
They're loving the PR machine. The Ryan-esque, let's just roll with the punches and go into his nuts.
I saw the bite on the night comment from the UFC's page, and I had to double take, man. I was like, this must be a meme page, and actually it's their official account. So I mean, you know, the UFC knows at this moment in time just how important social media and PR is, whether it's Power Slap or everything else, you know, so I can totally see exactly why.
And it's cool the opponents also leaned into it. He got a tattoo of the bite, like, which is like...
I heard Dana gave him 25 G's for that.
Did he?
That's why he did it, yeah, because Dana said, you know, I'll give you 25k extra if you decide that you're going to get that.
Do you know what I love about that? It's like, you get lucky if you just like roll into it, because like, how tough is it as a UFC fighter to stand out? Like, you can be the guy that boxed to the Indian guy, or you could be the guy that like, I got bitten. Let's just roll. What a genius marketing move. I love to see that sort of stuff.
This will stick with him forever, though. And one of the things that I saw in terms of when all of this came out is, of course, the internet does what the internet does, and it went sleuthing to try and find as much information as they could. And one of the interviews that he did before the fight was, ironically, him talking about not biting off more than he can chew, which is just incredible, isn't it? It's just super poetic and... yeah, man. Yeah, that guy's gonna have to do a lot of work to get past this.
Well. Let's move on to the second of the docket then. Now we covered that, which is Conor McGregor supposedly spasming on an interview, and I'll play a little bit of it on stream now so people can see. But I mean, it's an odd one, right? There's been a lot of controversy around Conor McGregor recently, specifically about him supposedly really wanting to fight but not being able to. He's coming out publicly saying, "Get me off the shelf," with Nate Diaz coming out with saying #Free Conor. What's your take on the spasm side? Because he's obviously got a set of very legal, very clearly defined obligations to the PR tour when you release any kind of movie like Roadhouse. My kind of initial take on it is he probably was doing some extracurricular fun, and, you know, he just had to rock up in the morning and then it happened.
So my hot take on this is that Conor should be giving his PR team a bit of a slap. And the reason for this is, if you've got the premiere of your first ever movie, you're alongside an A-list star, you've created this sort of thing, we have the premiere, what do you do at the premiere? You celebrate this enormous moment of your life.
Yes.
You maybe have a little bit to drink, and knowing Conor, maybe a little bit extra, and then you've got an interview scheduled the next day. I think, if anything, the fact that Conor was so clearly, brutally hungover and still turned up for his PR duties.
It's amazing.
You know, I actually commend the guy. Like, how much more evidence do you need to see that this is one of the hardest workers in the game? Do you know what I mean? He would, you know, he would have had every right to be like, God, Jesus, please don't schedule me for an interview. Just let me sleep, man. I've done this. It's already played. It's already premiered. Like, what more do you need? You know, and yet he's still there, turning up, doing his best, and he's still, you know, he's still very eloquent and specific. You know, he's still talking about the 75 movies that Jake's done. I think I'm going to switch this around, and it's not going to be a commentary on, you know, Conor's health or anything else. I think this is a commentary on his work ethic.
I think that's a great point, and I was reticent really to even bring this up because I feel like Dude, like, how annoying is it? Like, everything you do, every appearance you make on TV is ruthlessly scrutinized by saying, oh, did you see his left eye in proportion to his right eye wasn't quite right? And it's like they get down this insane rabbit hole. And it's just like, it must be a complete nightmare. Like, who the hell knows what's going on? Could just be neuromuscular, could be something standard. I think the big
Be
picture
too much to
is,
drink, bro. You know.
did you have, you start drinking the Guinnesses, and by Guinness 4, you don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, then you're
Irish man
drinking
hungover, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's a sensational headline, isn't it? You know?
It is. But supposedly he's slit to come back in the summer, actually, with Michael Chandler now. That's supposed to happen.
Yes.
But he was also talking about maybe just doing a 3-round fight. It's annoying. It's kind of what happened to John Jones when they're off for like so many years. I feel the real losers, the fans lose, obviously, because we don't get to see him. Like, it is brilliant at his peak.
Yep.
But they're also just super frustrated about it, and I completely see why.
I bet you there's more going on behind the scenes. Like, there's the UFC, not publicly, but like kind of notorious for, like they did with Ngannou, like retaining people within their contracts so they can't do anything else. And Conor is definitely saying all of the right things to get his contract completed. And if I was in Conor McGregor's corner team or his PR or his handlers or whatever, then I would be saying, this is what you need to be telling people. The UFC is my home. I'm never going to leave the UFC. I've been born and bred with the UFC. Like I've been trying to get equity from the UFC, like UFC. But we all know that what Conor really wants to do is to go and box and to go and do those sort of things. I know that he wants to fight. He's talking about that, but Conor McGregor has shown that he's motivated by the next big thing. He is that guy. He does not have a limiter, right? He's always the next level. It's not just it's a whiskey brand. It's this, it's that. It's McGregor fast. It's he is not a fighter as such. He is an entrepreneur in the truest sense of the word. And the next step for him, I don't think it's. Maybe he wants another shot at the championship, but I think his time at the peak of the sport is starting to fade, as it would do after that period of time. And which one's going to sell better, Conor versus Chandler, or Conor versus Diaz in a boxing match with a load of trash talk on a world tour? Do you know what I mean?
The problem for me, obviously, Conor can do what he wants. He's earned it. He was the first ever double champ. He pioneered it. He pushed MMA to an audience, and for that, he should have the respect of every fighter ever. And he can do whatever he wants.
He brought the sport up, man. They talk about rising tide bringing up all ships. Like, that guy is the tide.
Exactly. Everybody is now better off because of what McGregor did. The thing about the boxing crossovers, I feel the boxing crossovers are most exciting when the MMA fighter is undefeated or on a killer streak. A la Ngannou or McGregor when he stepped over to Mayweather. It was like, wow, can he also replicate this other great streak he's got in the world of boxing? So, he can do whatever he wants to do. I think he's just going for highlights. And if I'm Conor, I'm thinking about, you just want to go for that 170-pound belt. I think that's got to be the goal still, if he's able to do it. Beat Chandler maybe at 170 and just try to slit in there for a couple more amazing fights at 170 and then bounce.
If I'm looking through Conor McGregor's eyes, like the window is getting shorter. And if you think about it, right, so Conor fights Chandler, beats Chandler, and whether that's at middleweight or welterweight, like I think he's done the double champ thing. The next championship would be 170. But the window is closing because you have like killers coming through like Kamzat, like Shavkat. You've got these guys that are nightmare matchups for people like Conor. And do you know what I mean? Whereas Leon's a nightmare matchup for anyone, but at least Leon wants to keep it in the realm that Conor wants to keep it. A Shavkat and Kamzat, those guys are going to try and run through him at that weight class, but Leon is going to stand and trade, and it's going to be a nice technical match with so if I'm looking through Conor's eyes, I'm thinking like, bro, if I want to fight someone, I want to fight Leon. I don't want to be fighting Kamzat. I want to be fighting Shavkat.
Yeah. But 55 to 170 is big. If you're talking fully optimized biologically.
Feather, remember, man. He got down to featherweight. It's tough, really, really tough, and he's growing.
But he's on death's door. Like, he's an absolute 55. Like, it's 70, right? Like, I think but the size difference between 155 and 170 is huge. Like that 15 pound.
Oh, massive.
If you're fully optimized, like the difference is. So what is
I saw Leon out of camp on a treadmill in one of the hotels when I was working with Bellator, and after he'd done his workout, he jumped off onto the scales, and this is without a fight. 90 kilos.
So because guess 155.
So what is that in terms of in pounds for anybody else? That's
I I'll
That
find
is
it out now.
198. That's 198.
£198?
Yeah, 198 pounds for 170. So he's walking around 28 pounds above that. Is Conor walking around at 200 pounds?
No, because I guess
And if he is it usable muscle?
if you're 155, you're doing 82, 83 if you fully optimize. If you want 70, you're doing 90. So that's like 8 kg.
It's a lot.
Difference. That's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that leads on to the next thing, which I guess is Francis Ngannou.
Yep.
We spoke about it last week. What is very alarming to me is the time scales on when they want Ngannou to come back.
Yeah.
Makes me feel very uncomfortable. I don't like it. I think they're rushing him back. They haven't released a specific date yet, but they're eyeing up in the next couple of months or so to come back and fight an MMA. Is this far too soon, or are we just reading too much into the knockouts?
So I way too soon. Way too soon. I think a couple of things that are really important here. Some things that like might seem like small nuance. So Ngannou got knocked out, right? And that's bad. But he got dropped once. He got dropped twice. Then he got knocked out. So he essentially suffered 3 concussive blows. I mean, those are the ones that actually did the business, and then was separated from his consciousness. So we're not talking about a guy who's like, you know, a little bit concussed here. We're talking about a guy that's been bludgeoned, you know, and on top of that, like, how do you prepare for a boxing match? By stepping in a ring and getting punched in the face, man. You know what I mean? At heavyweight. You know, so either you're going to have to be talking about a Wolverine type recovery, and you're going to be talking about having sparring partners that are not really going to be able to go at the pace that you need to prepare for a top level professional match. Or you're talking about reducing your longevity, reducing your career span, and any way you shake it, you know, maybe I'm just completely wrong. Maybe he's completely fine. Maybe he's had a brain scan and he's absolutely fine. And because he hasn't taken that much damage in the past, particularly in terms of, you know, being knocked out or anything, maybe he's completely fine. And this is just one of them. But you know, I think it's very easy as somebody a bit younger to forget that you're going to be 45, 50, 60, 70, you know, you've got a life to live and a legacy to have behind you. And, you know, I wonder if you ask Muhammad Ali, which was more important, his legacy, if that's what happened, or no legacy and a nice, healthy, long life with his family and all the rest of it. I wonder if you put that choice on the table. I bet most of them would go legacy, but like still, it's, I like the guy. I think he's incredible, an incredible ambassador for the sport. I think his story is a miracle that's not a Netflix film right now, because the story's so incredible. I just want him to
It's still been written.
I want him to ride off into the sunset with his millions of dollars, because he fucking earned it, man.
Well, if we put things on the table, this is the way that I see it, right? He's got a defined period of time over which he will fight. Heavyweights can typically compete very well to the age of 40. I mean, we saw Teixeira win the belt at age 40 at light heavyweight. Yeah. Francis Ngannou is like 36 now, isn't he? So 36, 37. So he's got 3 to 4 years. Assuming he fights 4 times a year, he's got like 12 to 16 fights if he's on it, right? So it's a lot of fighting opportunity. Mm-hmm. Now, if you take the Max Hollowayology approach of, I've done so much sparring and fighting in my life, I don't feel like I need to spar in fight camps anymore. So essentially, even if Ngannou's fights in, let's say, 4 months' time, he does have 4 months of no brain damage. And maybe, like, I don't know, a couple weeks before the fight, he can start to rile that up there to give his brain as much opportunity as possible. That said, though, I sometimes think, you know, when you're hitting the bag and stuff, you do get those reverberations up your arm. And so it does I haven't got the science on this. It's pure intuition, jackology. But, like, I think that there is something about hitting pads hard up that you are causing, like, it does feel like it does come up, and
you are because you're pad man,
shots.
just trying to keep your hands up and flicking your back and all the rest. I think
there's some activity there for sure.
I think the only person who's really going to know the truth on this is Francis and or his doctors. Do you know what I mean? Like, the thing is that, you know, any injury is a massive spectrum. Any sort of like repeat injury is a massive spectrum. For all we know, Ngannou's walking around with a brutal headache every day. For all we know, he's fresh as a daisy, ready to go again immediately. Like, it's a very, I always towards to the fight of safety, always. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like, prize fighting is just that, because what's the point of having this incredible career if you don't get a chance to actually experience the fruits of your labor, or if you do so incredibly compromised. So, but I think maybe that's not the best mentality for a coach to have, to be just so concerned about your fighter's health. You know, at a certain point that could become detrimental, you know.
Well, whose responsibility is it for fighter health? I
think it's a shared responsibility, but if you had to put it all on one person, I I'd say me as coach. Do you know what I mean? Like I think like at the end of the day, you can coerce a fighter into doing what you want, if you drive and push and pull hard enough, I'm sure. You know, I mean, we've seen this time and time again of people who are, you know, maybe in a bit too quickly or fighting injured or all the rest. These fighters, they will trust what you suggest for them because they believe you've got their best interests at heart and all the rest of it. And I think that's such a tremendous responsibility that you should never underplay that. I mean, recently we had Louis Blair who hurt his knee. You know, and we got offered a late replacement fight for him. That was a very, very favourable fight. And when I asked him how his knee was, he was like, "Oh, it's largely better." Do you know what I mean? I was like, "How did you find it in sparring?" "Oh, a bit sore, a bit swollen, but you know, it's largely better." Do you know? And I was just like, "He's amateur, this is as well."
Yep.
So I was just like, "Well, it's not better then, is it?" Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, as much as this is going to be fantastic for your career, for your confidence, and for the rest of it, like, now we've, you know, you late 20s, we've got all the time in the world. Do you know what I mean? But you need to have, because he's just ready to go, man. Do you know what I mean? And so you need to have somebody who pulls on the leash, and you need to have somebody who lets them go as well. You know.
In my mind, I think it's paradoxical for a fighter to be the person that's responsible for their safety, because I feel you can't actually achieve your potential as a fighter if you are, because like you wouldn't go and spar. It's like, well, if I'm optimizing for safety, why am I don't want to take the damage, or you're completely right. The two trains running in opposite directions, which is why I think if you go back to the legendary conversation that Joe Rogan had with Brendan Schwab, he's like, how do you think you do against Cain Velasquez? He's like, I think you'd be surprised. He goes, I think you'd be surprised. I think you'd be really surprised. And he had to have that tough chat with him. And people obviously rip on Brendan Schwab for different reasons, but you have to remember that, like, he's a fighter. In his mind, he has to be the guy that comes out and destroys. He can't have room in his brain for, shit, I really can't get hit by Travis Brown in this situation, because it then undermines his performance, which means he's less effective at his core thing for which he's trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's an interesting one, isn't it? It's really, really interesting because it's hard to find... It's not hard, but there are plenty of coaches out there who will have conflicts of interest in terms of what they do and actually listen to those, you know. And there's coaches who their entire earnings are 10% of their fighter. You know what I mean? And if your income is literally dependent on whether your fighter competes or not, and if you've got a fighter like an Ngannou who's going to make 20 million quid and you're going to take 10% of that, that might be the biggest payday that you ever have in your entire life.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're saying, you know, hey, coach, you don't get that 2 million quid, but your fighter's going to feel pretty nice and not have a concussion. Or you can send him out there to go and have another fight after a concussion, which he might be fine. He might be absolutely fine. He might just do another Tyson Fury and you get 2 million quid.
And it's so easy to say, man up, stop being a sister, you're a fighter. You put some of that Rocky 3 motivational music on and you send him out there and all of a sudden everything, it's like, no. You need somebody in your corner who's going to be your huge advocate. But absolutely. I think, speaking of corner, leads us on really nicely to what you did this weekend, man. So you were at Bellator, cage side, man. Talk us through, like, I guess just your experience at Bellator this weekend, and then anything interesting that you found when you were down there.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously Bellator was just bought by PFL. I have a small role in Bellator. I work in the fighter ops team and make sure that everything runs nice and smooth. And I also work the cage door, which is truthfully, it's the best job ever, man. Best
true
job
challenge, yeah.
Forget. I think those guys maybe have missed a trick because I would pay them for that role. You know what I mean?
Cut that out.
Yeah. But so essentially, it's one of those where if everything goes perfectly smooth, then you know a 5-year-old could do that job. But at the end of the day, like it's you're there to basically ensure that everything does go smooth, whether it's fighters without gum shield, whether it's people leaving the stool, whether it's stuff in the cage, whether it's 2 corners in, 1 corner a cut, man. There's a lot more to the role than just that. And personally, it's one of my favorite roles I've ever had. I've worked for the UFC, I've worked for ACB, I've worked for Bellator, and Bellator by far is the best atmosphere to work within. It's incomparable.
As a fan or as somebody in like the operations in the monk?
I'd say definitely. Well, certainly on the operations side. For the on the fan side, they obviously recognise that they're in competition with larger organisations as well. So they really do a great amount of fan service. But really, I was a little bit interested to see how the new structure would be following the purchase from PFL, and I'm really pleased to say that actually, like, what I was surprised by was how much PFL took into consideration the operations and logistics side, and they, here's a huge credit to PFL because they actually had people from our teams write up reports on how the events work and how they went, so that they could see, can we implement anything from you to us? You know what I mean? Which is a really humble way of doing it. Like, oh, we're buying you. Is there anything that you think we can do better? Like, what a cool mindset that is.
Continuous improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the European series is led by Dan Hardy, who is just one of the coolest cats on the planet. Do you know what I mean?
Pretty cool guy.
An absolute OG of the UK MMA scene. But the whole event went really smoothly. Some of the fights were absolutely epic. Some of the fights were, a little bit more difficult when fighters realize that they have to go a certain way to win. Do you know what I mean? But there were massive, massive, massive moments on that.
I think for me, what I think is most interesting about you going there and doing that is, yes, obviously the fights are exciting, but you almost have this really peculiar thing. We have this wealth of MMA knowledge that all just sort of like, you have this nucleus of, just intelligence in these locker rooms where obviously everyone's there for the fights. But when you've got that learning mindset, you've developed these kind of cage systems and stuff.
Absolutely.
You get to like share and brainstorm things. Were there any particular techniques, or what are you hearing in the meta?
Yeah,
some
absolutely.
Conversations?
So I'll go into a very specific technique that I saw that just when I saw it, I was just like, that's awesome. And for me, there's a couple of criteria that I look at for
the bite.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't seen that before. Got to use 100% of your body, I was very fortunate outside of once the event's completed and everybody's had their fights and everything. I don't tend to. It's a conflict of interest to communicate with the fighters too much before they actually compete. But once the event's completed and everything, the job's well done, we're all sort of off the clock and everything. In the hotel lobby afterwards, I got a chance to pick the brains of some guys, and I'd like to give a couple of shout outs. There's one guy called Kieran Clark, and Kieran Clark is, for all intents and purposes, just sort of a miniature Irish Khabib. He is not only is he fantastic when he competes, but in speaking to him, I had a couple of quick questions about the way he deals with certain body lock positions. One thing that I'm workshopping at the moment is that. Yeah, I'll just show you on camera. Why not? Is that position where if somebody's got a back body lock, I've got my head against the wall. It's Islam versus Volk, and Islam's got his body lock. He's trying to take Volk down either way. You know what I mean? And I noticed that was the most effort that Islam put into a takedown in the fight. And so I'm always keen to see how people deal with that sort of tripoded against the wall position. And so we had some interesting takes on that. Another fight I'd like to shout out is
what was one of the takes, by the way?
So how long have you got? But so to break it down, you've got hands locked and hands unlocked. And obviously my hands are locked, then I'm going to be trying to use my legs and my upper body to off balance you.
Yeah.
If I unlock my hands, I'm going to probably look for a lower body takedown. Okay, so because I asked a couple different people and I got a couple different answers, and now I'm going to go workshop all of those until I can sort of
synthesize the ideas.
Yeah, and I'll prioritize those A to F or whatever they're going to be, and then I'll see if that holds true for heavyweight and flyweight and everything in between, or if your lighter guys should consider something a little bit different to your heavier guys. Do you see what I'm saying here? But so first things were, if they are fighting your hands very efficiently, one of the things that you could do, this actually came from one of the shoot fighter guys, is keep your hands locked, and instead of thinking about trying to take him down, smash your hips into his hips so he doesn't have his bum back, like, so he's not quite like this. Really, really pinned against the wall, which is going to stop him from having the ability to, push the hands down to create that braking pressure. And then once they're flat against the wall, now you can start to think about throws behind yourself, sacrifice throws. You can think about takedowns to the side, and you can do those like leg trips where you pull them backwards over themselves, which is very hard to do when they've got a stable structure, because the harder they drive into the wall, the harder backwards based takedowns.
Now you mention that, I've seen that so many times, that kind of head structure, and then
very tough to deal with. Yeah.
It's like, it's the elimination space.
Absolutely.
Just a space that you didn't think about in relation to a cage. We always think about space in terms of the body, but not the cage. That's a really interesting way to think about it.
There was a couple of people saying that they really like to do the lifts from there. So what Islam, or what Islam did, which was essentially he ran left super hard and then changed direction and went right. And again, that was a lot of effort because Volk could read that sort of thing. So the other things, Kieran was talking about a leg split where you put a hook in and pull one of their legs away, so they end up with their legs really wide, so they're sort of like falling into the cage a little bit. I like that a lot, but it's quite hard to actually, that's really like a transition into other systems. That's not a takedown in itself. And what I personally prefer is if my hands are locked and somebody's doing a good job, like a good job of breaking my hands apart, what I don't want to do is burn my grips out in a competitive bout. So the timing has to be critical here, because the thing is, if you let them break your hands and then you go for the technique, then that's not really going to work. But if you're proactively breaking your hands when they're not expecting it to happen, you get this little tiny timestamp you can take advantage of.
Take advantage, yeah.
And what we would do is we would break the grips, and then we would lower our levels, hands on the thigh, shoulder underneath the tailbone, drive them in and up the fence, and then wrench their legs out from underneath them. And that's maybe I'll shoot a little video or something that I can tag onto our channel just after the podcast, so people can have a little bit of an understanding of what I'm talking about.
I think that'd be really nice, actually. And one of the bits I would just dive into a little bit, like especially seeing a lot of the events, is the throws, the exotic, the suplexes. Yeah, it's weird one, isn't it? Because I know you hate them, but I'm going to challenge you on that a little bit, because it fit like when you. Okay, I found most of the time the exotic throws that I do, people can just bounce back sometimes. They can pop back up.
It's too much momentum.
However, and there's a cardiovascular cost associated with that.
Absolutely. But that's why I hate it. Yeah.
That's the reasons not to. But I've seen whenever a throw lands, especially exotic stuff, the crowd goes, what? And like it becomes like when you play back the highlights of the round, that's the first thing you go to, 100%. And it sticks in the judge's mind. So it's almost like a little investment in the scorecard, I guess the scorecard column of, if this fight isn't going to finish, let's give the fans something to shout about. It builds up my equity in their minds and also helps them win the fight. So it's almost like, I wonder if there are certain, given you kind of hedge that appropriately with your cardio to actually go ahead and do that.
Yeah, so, last 15 seconds of the fight, by all means, hit your 7-chain suplex, do you know what I mean? Like, or 7 suplex chain. Yeah, so everything's just like a cost-benefit analysis, isn't it? And so the benefit is obviously the excitement, and realistically, like, promotions want exciting fighters. Do you know? I mean, nobody's tuning in to entertainment to watch slow-paced, non-impactful fighting.
What about, just tag on to that, your thoughts, like, what about the psychological demoralization of being suplexed? And I've seen some of the Daggy guys, they'll train like 4 or 5 suplexes together, and you're getting ragdolled around the ring. You're thinking, what the hell am I going to do to this guy? Like, there's a bit of a psychops going on there as well. Like,
have you been slammed badly before?
No.
I've been slammed in one of my fights. So I caught the guy in an armbar, and he picked me up to like chest height and launched me into the floor, man, super hard. In fact, I've been slammed a couple of times now that I think of it.
I'm like, you don't expect,
Yeah, he slammed me into the floor really, really hard, but he landed on like the upper part of my back across my shoulders.
Got you.
And I remember thinking, for how big a slam that wasn't really a problem at all. And that maybe that's a bit of a psychological bias in my side of things, because I remember thinking, like, for how big that looks on camera, it literally did nothing. Like, I am not impeded in any way, shape, or form. But you must be tired, pulling me up with a deadlift to do that,
To be fair, though, you would have had a lot of positional integrity with your experience.
Yeah. Right? If you'd have hit me on the back of my head, I think it would have been wildly different.
Like, if your head had been back here,
if there's like a whipping motion, or if you'd hit me with the crown or something, it would have been completely different. So I think, in terms of the psychological side of things, like, no human dude wants to say that he's been picked up and slammed by another dude. Like, I get that, but I think in my scenario, if I was, let's say somebody like, I stood up, the guy suplexed me super hard, I stood up. I mean, as long as I haven't taken any damage, I actually feel like, which is, it's a big if, right? Of course, it's a big if. That's the whole point of, getting somebody down to the ground like that, is to make sure that it's impactful so that you can consolidate position because of that impact. But I actually think, I know how hard it is to suplex somebody who doesn't want to be suplexed. I know that if I did it 3 times in a row, it would take a cost. Yeah. And I also know that if I was then inverted on that, as long as I haven't taken any damage, I think I'd actually been like, nice. Do you know what I mean?
Cool.
Like,
no,
nice.
It's cool. Because the only thing I found, like, some gyms, when they teach the suplex, there's ways you can throw it that basically you're not actually doing any lifting. You're just sort of leaning back.
It's like a hip bump and a knee.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And like you find when you... We've got, just for guys who don't train the gym, like, Liam's bought this like mat. It's like literally this. It's absolutely huge, and like we bought it for like to do like slams and stuff. Actually, it'd be cool to check out some of the suplexes on that at some point.
100%, 100%. I think, I think this is like, it's nice being slammed onto a big giant comfy mat. But with the the suplex is like, I completely agree that it should be a technical thing. Like it should be a technical thing. You watch like some of the guys who are drilling with that beautiful arc that they do, and everything else, and it looks, I wouldn't say effortless, it clearly isn't, but it doesn't look effortful. Do you know what I mean? But what I'm saying is when you've got a guy who's resisting fully and who really doesn't want to be suplexed, I guarantee you it's going to cost you effort no matter how technical you are.
It's true. We also don't really see it at the highest levels often.
Yeah. You've got to take, let's say you're a lightweight fighter and your guy's rehydrated back up to 78, 80 kilo, whatever it is, he's back up there at, 175 pounds or something like that. Like, get a bag that's 175 pounds, lift it up and throw it over your shoulder. Tell me that there's like a technique there that's going to make it like effortless. Do you know?
Yeah, I guess it's equivalent of like 20 leg kicks or like it's 3 grappling exchanges.
Work, especially when with the same grip that I have around your waist, I could just pinch my knees and make you fall onto your hands.
Yeah, do you know it's so funny? It's a funny little thought to wrap this on. I know there's so much we could talk about, but you've seen the Neuralink implant that's enabled people to control stuff.
Mario Kart and tweets, man. What is going on in the future?
It's phenomenal. We've got monkeys that can see again. I actually wondered what are my cool, like, I guess, predictions are going to be is that I think if we had these Neuralink implants in fighters, what would be cool is to have like an augment for your stamina bar, kind of like Street Fighter, where like you can actually like translate that down. Like, oh, dude, definitely. We'll have like a whole like augmented fighter division where like you're kind of like, we'll say, are you human or are you robot? It's not a binary thing, it's a spectrum thing. You could already argue it's actually on a spectrum anyway, because like, is it connected to us? No, but it's essentially it's an extension of how we think of what we do. So I just think that would be a cool little side quest for Elon, if you're watching, to just think about that.
That'd be sick. Like, so in between rounds, no stamina potions, no health potions.
It's stamina bars to 40%.
Just to finish off the thought from a while back in terms of shouting out fighters, there was my last opponent was a guy called Oscar Owensworth, and he was fighting. He took a late notice. He was 8-2 going into this, and in my opinion, he put on the fight of the night.
Wow,
so it's always it's always a bit of a guilty pleasure to see somebody you've competed against do really, really well. You know what I mean? In the sense that like it obviously makes anything that you've worked there. So. The other thing was just a really lovely dude. It's a really, really, really nice guy, and so I'm really happy for him that he got a chance to show his quality and his level, and he fought a super, super high level guy, and it ended up going to decision, and the stats were pretty much even in terms of strikes and everything else. The other guy was just a bit more impactful, and that took him the decision. So credit to you, Oscar. You really sort of like put the rest of the card on notice in terms of what an entertaining fight should be.
And late notice too. That's fantastic. Yeah.
And it's a shame that he didn't win, because the performance that he put on, like when you're talking about a sport, when you're talking about entertainment, and he just embodied that 100%. Like I mean, he's a promoter's dream. Yeah. Well done, Oscar, mate. Honestly, for that, I'm really, really, really impressed. Really, really impressed.
Well, I'm sure that people appreciate getting these insights and stuff. So I think that wraps up. We've covered a lot of interesting stuff for this week. We've gone from biting down to Ngannou. So thanks everyone for watching.
Yes, sir.
Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.